Hi, so I'm here with Saurav Dutta. He's from one of the co-producers on a film called Rockumentary, Evolution of Indian Rock. Congratulations. Welcome.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for having me here as well.
No, welcome to Valencia, welcome to our festival, and taking the time to join us. I know you've come a long way, and I know there was some grief, but we got there in the end.
That's fine. That's all part and parcel of the journey, I guess.
No, thank you. Now, I've seen the film, and I've kind of alluded to the Beatles connection to this film, to this documentary, but it's obviously more than that. But can you tell us what the story is about this film?
So basically, our film is an insight into the journey of rock music in India. Ever since it came into India from in the early 1940s till the present contemporary scene, how it has transitioned through the various decades. So our film is an earnest attempt at documenting it.
And I should mention that the reason I mention the Beatles because that's quite a large portion of the connection to this film,
yes.
Isn't it? Can you? And very well done. The film is brilliantly made.
Thank you so much.
Can you give me what was quite surprising actually? One thing that shoots out straight away was I don't think I've seen anything like this before. To try and go through the transitional stages of Indian music over the last 4, 5, 6 decades. Bit of a surprise that hasn't been done before. So. How did this project come about?
In the last decade, there have been many films from Bollywood that has been produced, which has tried to capture a rock musician's life, rock musician's journey. But then there has never been an attempt at trying to get into the, get into a real rock music scene. What exactly it is like on ground zero? Yeah. What exactly do the bands actually have to face? And on today's date, we are so much technologically advanced. We have everything on the tip of our fingertips. But then, if you talk about 60s, there were independent musicians back then who never even had an access to LP records. Even let's not even talk about radio channels. So this was actually our driving force because we ourselves were very curious to know that how is it that rock music got into a country where classical music, traditional, and folk music were the main sources of entertainment.
The dominant music, yes. I guess. So someone's come up with this idea. Someone has said, I know, let's make a film about. And who was that? How were you involved?
That was Abhimanyu Kukreja. Abhimanyu Kukreja has been an entertainment journalist in the mainstream media in India for the last decade and a half. And then he had himself produced a 2-episode show for INX News. He was an entertainment journalist back then. When I was researching on the same subject, I saw Abhimanyu Kukreja on YouTube. I came across his content, and that's how I traced him out.
Right.
And I asked him if he'd, be interested in producing a feature-length documentary film on this same subject, and that's how collaboration happened.
Oh, okay. So it was quite by chance this happened with you.
Yes.
I know, but if you would explain, what is the role of a producer in your opinion? So what does it entail?
For me, as a producer, I would rather say I don't just produce, I manage everything.
Right? So you're spinning the plates, we say?
Yes, I take care of all the production inside that requires, that's basically lining up the artist and again getting everything in place so that the crew can be made available for everyone as and when needed across India.
Yeah.
And not just that, we also take care of the finances as well.
Yeah, because I remember one producer said to me, every time I'm asked to change something in the film, my first question is, how much is it going to cost? Because
Abhimanyu Kukreja was always given a free hand.
Yeah, right.
He was given a free hand.
No, I'm saying in general that's what's been said to me because, of course, films cost money.
Yes.
And in fact, interestingly, with your film, which kind of touches upon that is, often with documentaries, when you have archive footage, you've got to pay for the footage often, haven't you? And you'll have a budget, whatever that is. But I guess what I'm getting at is you want to try and stick to that budget, so you've got do everything you can to stay within those budgetary.
We always had a ballpark figure in mind, but then gradually during the course of our production, we understood that we cannot restrict ourselves to the pre-set limit of budget or expenses.
Yeah.
So we had to stretch that. We had to stretch that considerably so that everything could be accommodated at the same time. Because licensing fees is a completely different aspect that needs to be taken care of, and that is very important, obviously.
Yeah, of course, and it's very difficult. It can be very difficult if you're on a certain subject matter not to include archive footage because it makes it difficult, doesn't it?
True.
So with What's your background? Because this isn't your first film, is it?
This is my first film.
No, it is your first film?
Yes, this is
Oh my
my
God,
first
so
film.
all right, so how did
So
that happen?
this
Because you
film-
come across as very experienced in this field, so I'm very...
Yes, so basically I'm an entrepreneur by profession. I am not from the media or entertainment industry. And this film or this subject was something that was very close to my heart. That's why, since I was an entrepreneur and media production also is another industry that I wanted to venture into, I chose this subject to, be the first step, be my first step into the entertainment industry gradually. That's how
Wow.
this film came up.
So although you may have invested in other theatres
Enterprises.
in terms of business and other projects, this is your first foray into film.
This is first foray into film.
And please, I know it's tough, and of course, it may be tougher than you thought, but I don't know. But give us a flavour of what you're expecting and what the reality was like.
Initially, in the earlier stages, I'm talking about early 2015, 2016, while we were still shooting for the film, we realized that this film has a huge audience because rock music has a global appeal.
Yeah.
And we cannot limit ourselves to just the Indian audiences. So in order to have a global appeal, we made sure that we could cover as much as content as we could
Yeah.
and keep it concise and compact at the same time and not stretch it beyond 90 minutes. So because documentaries, if long, tend to get a bit monotonous for many.
Right.
So we try to keep it
that's a good
concise.
point.
We
Yeah, that's a
we
good
had to
point.
keep it concise and crisp at the same time.
It's just so interesting that you're willing to invest in projects, but still someone needs to sell it to you. And what I mean by sell is,
To market it.
well, I mean more case of sell their vision to you. I mean, you kind of wanted to know you want to be involved in the project, but then you've got to get a team in that've got to come up with a concept with you and say, okay, well, this is how we think we're going to do it. Because at the end of the day, you've got to be one of the people that approves it, haven't you? You can't go out and do it without your say-so. So I'd be interested or intrigued to know if the project you thought you were being part of is the project that you ended up with. Is it pretty much how you envisaged it to be?
Absolutely, sir.
And
I always wanted this film to come out, and it has come out exactly the way we wanted it to be.
Right.
Not just me, I mean our entire team of production.
oh, yeah, the truth is, the production on this is high. You know, you can see there's some fantastic footage in it. The work's been put together, great cinematography, editing, sound design, and all that. I mean, this is a pucker production, as we would say. It's fantastic. How long did it all take?
It took us almost 6.5 years of pre-production activities and then a year and a half of post-production
Oh,
part.
So you 7.5 years?
Yes, because our research also took a quite a long time.
Of course it does, yes. It's got to
and
be right.
we kept shooting till 2017, and when it was the month of 2017, we finally realized that probably we now have enough content, enough footage to make this film. This film accurate, as far as accurate as we could. That's when we decided to not shoot any further and proceed on to the post-production part.
And what are you doing in that time period? Because you're not sitting still in 6 years. You're
I
doing
also
other
run
things.
my family business. We are
Right.
also into constructions and food processing and distribution back home.
So would you like, now you've got a taste for filmmaking, now you've been heavily involved in filmmaking, do you think it's something you'd like to carry on with?
Definitely.
Have you been bitten by the bug?
Yes.
And
Yes, I am.
what was enjoyable about it? What did you like about putting the film together?
The fact that whatever came up onto the platter through our journey of discovery was completely mind-blowing. We never knew such incidents happened because, say, when you talk about rubber plant coming into India and having a spontaneous jam session in 1970s, many people don't know about
I
it.
didn't know that, no.
Yes.
Well, I didn't know that.
Or
no.
many people don't even know about that. There's, the Beatles came into India during the 1960s, and they had a stay at Mahesh Yogi's ashram. So these are facts that have not been brought onto the mainstream screen.
Yeah, and I think that if we sort of linger for a moment with the Beatles, the thing, I mean, I know we spoke about this off camera, because everyone knows that they went through this period of spirituality. And I think, personally, particularly George Harrison, I know who affected all of them, but and again, everyone knows, if you listen to the Beatles from, say, 1964, 65, 66-ish, but then, of course, they're transitioning into a completely different kind of music, because the fact is, if you listen to Sgt. Pepper's, or the White Album, or Let It Be, and then listen to Help, Hard Day's Night, it's completely different, because of course they've transitioned through that then, haven't they? They've become more spiritual, I think. And it's interesting because you do dwell on the Beatles because of course they're so enormous. Was that always the intention? I know it sounds like a bit of a puerile question because, but it, you know,
because
you want lots of content about them, of course.
Because back in the 1950s when Indian independent musicians were taking inspiration from their Western idols.
Yeah.
When it came to the music industry, the Western musicians like Beatles were also influenced by the Indian spirituality. That's why they came to India to seek spiritual enlightenment in certain ways. And that helped them create further music, which became worldwide hit.
That did. I mean, just they, as I say, they completely changed the whole sound. How do you make sure the vision? Because there are other producers on this film, and I know you all have a kind of general vision of how you want this film to be at the end. But how do you make sure that you all stay on the same? Because your version of how you want this film to be may be different to, I think Elizabeth's a producer.
For me, Elizabeth and Abhimanyu, all three of us, we were aligned on one fact that this film had to be the benchmark film as far as a rock music documentary from India goes. So the content cannot be, mismatched. It has to be linear.
Yeah.
So we were very clear on that part. So there was never a conflict of interest among the three of us regarding this.
Because they could have easily been, couldn't they?
Yes, because people's opinions differ.
Yeah,
but then when you have the facts straight, you don't have much to argue upon.
And what about directing?
Abhimanyu took care of it completely.
You'd want to do that?
No way. That was Abhimanyu's call. That is always him.
No, but moving forward in the future?
No, I'll only stick to production.
Let someone else call the shots.
I'd rather take care of the commercials and the marketing part. That's what I'm probably good at.
So how will you move, because clearly, like I say, all joking aside, you've clearly been bitten by the bug. How are you now, what's your plans to move from this, and it is a brilliantly made film, from this film into other projects? What's happening in the background? Are you now slowly becoming more and more involved in other productions?
We are planning to have a sequel to this documentary film because 90 minutes is not enough to showcase 70 years of Indian rock music. So probably 3 years down the line, we would come up with a sequel that now shows that rock music from India has gone to different stages across the world. That's what we have in plan. And secondly, as a producer, I'm also looking at content that bridges Indian culture with Western societies. Because a lot of Indians are now settled across in Europe and North America.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
so there are so many stories that could be brought to the main screen.
Yeah.
And there are stories that would connect with so many hearts. So that is what we are looking at now. I'm not talking about, say, bilingual films, but probably not necessarily limited to Hindi language films as well.
Right. And can you give me a flavour of how much Western music plays a part in Indian pop chart? I mean, I don't know what the Indian pop charts are. Is it mainly Indian music that dominates for the youngsters? Is it mainly Indians, or has Western music more and more coming into it?
For the youngsters back in India, it's mainly Western pop and Bollywood music that they are hooked onto.
Okay.
And there is a very core following for rock music as well. Multiple genres of rock music, not just say classic rock, but we can talk about neo metal, we can talk about death metal, we can talk about alternative rock. So there are multiple genres in rock music as well that gets the kids, that gets the youngsters rather, hooked onto it.
So if I went back 15 years ago and looked at a chart then to now, would the difference be profound? Would I be able to see a cultural shift in terms
There has been a shift. There has been a shift in preference of music. People, kids, or rather youngsters back then were more inclined towards rock music, but nowadays they are more inclined towards EDM. So there has been a shift.
And of course, what's driving a lot of this is the internet.
Right.
Because as you know, I mean,
and everything is available at the tip of your fingertips.
Yeah, you've got it there, haven't you? Yeah. And communications is instant, of course. Are you surprised how, excuse me, how you've become, addiction is the wrong word, have become seduced, might be a better word, by filmmaking, that might be a better word, I don't know. Were you expecting that, or is it a bit of a surprise to you?
It happened in its own due course of time, actually. It's like you don't really start liking wine, but then the more you have it, the more you get hooked onto it.
Well, maybe, yeah. Although luckily, filmmaking isn't bad for you unless you lose a lot of money, of course. But it's just a very interesting story in terms of, because yours is unusual, because although you're an entrepreneur and decided this is what you wanted to do, fact is, most first-time projects of filmmakers don't necessarily have this, dare I say, high caliber of production about them. And it's interesting to know that you've gone in, because obviously this was announced that you wanted to do this, get it right straight away. And that's very different from my own personal experience. I think a lot of the projects we see are very well made, but this is really polished. I think that's what I'm trying to get at. And I mean, were you involved at every stage? How?
Not at every stage, because
I mean, I don't mean you may have been there on set or filming Rock Band.
When things got onto the edit table, it was Abhimanyu's call all throughout, because he knew the director's perspective, he knew his vision best, and he exactly knew how this film should be showcased to the audiences. So it was always his call. But then me and Elizabeth always gave him the free hand to get everything right, so that the first film becomes the benchmark for us.
And it's high.
And we need to do better production in the future. This cannot be a mediocre project for us, because it establishes our identity in the industry gradually.
And how did you know he was the right director? Where did you get? How did you?
It's his passion. He's been.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't frame that question very well. What I mean is, how did you know that he was definitely going to be the right man? I know it's because even so, it's always still a risk. That's what I'm getting at, isn't it? But I'm guessing from the very outset, you just knew he was going to be the right man to complete the film.
Obviously, since he has already done a 2-episode part for a television series, and he already had the facts in place, and he already had his research done to quite an extent. Yeah. Right. If he want to go into producing a feature-length documentary film, what exactly do we need? He got his basics correct. Yeah. And we also had a very highly experienced post-production team, headed by Satyajit Gazmai as the editor, and then Vineet Bakshi as the graphic designer from Delhi. Yeah. So Satyajit brought in his specialization from Bollywood. He has edited a multiple number of Bollywood films, A-lister films, and again Vineet Bakshi has been to the graphic industry for the last 20 years. So we had expertise on a senior level as well.
And that's actually reflected even in the clips I received, because when I was getting the clips organised, you can tell just by looking at each of the clips, you know, how much effort's gone into this. What surprised you about the whole project? Is there anything that's really surprised you about it?
Surprised in a good way?
Well, either way, good or bad way.
One thing that I have noticed is that Indian audiences are now opening up gradually, but then the youngsters, they have deviated into other genres of music. So what has happened is their parents are more inclined towards this genre of documentary films, but the youngsters are not.
I wonder if that's because it's historic. So of course some of the youngsters won't know.
But then
forgive me, they won't,
yes, but these youngsters are the same ones who listen to Guns N' Roses. But then if you're listening to Guns N' Roses, you should be knowing who Indus Creed is at the same time. Yeah. And Indus Creed is one of the pioneers of rock music in India. So it's just a hypothetical example.
Yeah, no, but you must know better than me, so you must have seen the kind of, well, what has been the reaction? I mean, what kind of feedback have you had?
Nothing as such, to be very honest. But then, as I say, it's been a learning graph for us, so we are still learning through whatever feedback we are getting from the audiences and whoever is taking a liking to us, the film, or even being criticizing of, we may not have covered this and we may not have covered that. But honestly, as filmmakers, we best know how exactly to put this film across, because you just cannot show or talk about things on screen. You need to have visuals to back it up. You need to have core facts to back it up as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, maybe, because I've come across this before, that a documentary filmmaker has produced a film that's 90 minutes, and a broadcaster has said, well, we really like this, but it needs to be cut to 60, or 45 or 50, because that's often the case to get to an hour slot, isn't it? So I guess questions, I suspect you're prepared for that eventuality that you may have to cut another 30 or 40 minutes from the film.
No, we would not.
You're not? Okay, so that's it.
We would not. This is the film that we have, and this is how it will be.
And you've already discussed and Tony said, even if someone says, we're not going to touch it.
Because we cannot cut away facts from the film. It will remain, it will become incomplete.
Well, I'm only asking because I know it happens, and then it becomes a real dilemma about what you do. And it sounds to me that thankfully you've decided at the very outset, whatever happens, the final cut is the final cut. And that's okay, brilliant. How much sleep did you lose making this film?
3 years. Yes, 3 years.
Okay, brilliant. That's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me with you. Thank you so much.
Congratulations.